Good morning, everyone. I'm Dawn Genvy, and I'm a research manager in the Patient and Public Involvement team at NIHR. Welcome to the 11th in our PPI in Action webinar series. Today's presentation is focused on how to develop a PPI group. Before the presentation, I'll very quickly run through some housekeeping. Please use the chat function if you would like to network with others on the webinar. Please don't use the chat for the questions that you have. You can enable captions by clicking on the CC button. And if you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function by clicking on the Q&A button. You can select to send your question anonymously if you don't want your name displayed with it. Once you've finished, please click send to submit your question. Without further ado, I'm delighted to now hand you over to Tina King.
Hi, welcome to this PPI in Action webinar today. I'm Tina King. I'm the chair of a patient and public involvement group, which is based in Bristol, involved in a study into prehabilitation, which is preparing people for surgery prior to open heart surgery.
Hi, I'm just watching the chat below. I'm not sure everyone can hear us, but we'll give it a go. And I'm Sarah Murray. I am the chair of the National Clinical Research Collaborative for Cardiac Surgery for the PPI group based at Leicester University. Good morning.
So the idea of our session today is to talk through how we built our PPI group from the ground up. We're not intending to present you with a template for a perfect PPI group. We've far from worked out what one of those is yet ourselves, but rather to take you through our journey so far. Now, we've been told that our group and our PPI work is an exemplar of collaborative clinical research design. And indeed, we've been complimented by the NIHR for what we've achieved so far. On our way to this point, though, we have made many errors and have been presented with many challenges. But we hope that by sharing both our triumphs and our mistakes, that our experiences may benefit others.
So patients should be at the centre of medical research, and the projects that are undertaken should be tailored to our needs. It's really important when designing research, you have the patient voice right front and centre of any particular work you do, because after all, it is for us. If it's not for us, then it is just whimsy of someone trying to find a medical answer. So you ignore it at our peril, and we can contribute in a variety of ways, and we're very good at it. And it's hoped very much today that by presenting to you, we encourage you to use PPI in your research projects if you haven't already. And if you are thinking about becoming a PPI member, you might consider joining.
So just to talk you through a little bit about our PPI journey. So the basis of our particular group was formed when the cardiac prehabilitation research project was at the program development grant stage, right at the very beginning. Now, at that time, we were just a small group. Some of the people had been involved in PPI before, but others, such as myself, were very new to the idea. But we'd responded, having had open heart surgery or cared for somebody with open heart surgery, and become interested in the research that was occurring in the hospital and keen to do what we could for others following us.
So although the main researchers were very keen to include us at the beginning and were very enthusiastic, they weren't quite sure how to go about it. So it was a voyage of discovery for all of us, how best to incorporate our views, how best to work together. And it was not always easy for them to carry the whole team. And some members of the research teams were very dismissive in their attitudes of the wider research team, i.e. us as well. And it made it difficult for our patient voices to be heard.
So despite these early, very definite frustrations, we persevered. And actually, we had quite a significant turning point as a group, because we went to a face-to-face workshop and we were being met by some quite dismissive attitudes from some of the team. But the whole of the PPI group stood up And we actually shared our concerns, our feelings, and more particularly our fears over heart surgery. This event proved to be quite powerful. And as a result, some of even the most dismissive clinicians accepted that our opinions could actually be valuable to them and that we could benefit their research rather than, as they previously felt, just getting in their way.
It was a really interesting meeting. We had two camps in the room. All of the researchers coalesced around one table, and all the patients coalesced around another table for safety. And I think the researchers wanted safety as much as the patients. So when the line of patients got up to give their stories and to share their stories, the atmosphere in the room completely changed. It was
I think they
absolutely
felt a bit
palpable.
intimidated initially, didn't they?
I think it's really unfortunate because nobody wanted to intimidate them. But we just wanted to highlight what the story was we wanted them to hear. And as I was saying to Tina, for me, one of the most important stories was the clinician who turned patient. And that was incredibly valuable. The phrase poacher turned gamekeeper is a crass one, but they'd seen both sides. And the thing that I always hold with that conversation was I didn't know what it was like until I'd been through it myself. And that is absolutely key to every piece of research that we do and the involvement that we have with the patients. You don't know until you've walked a mile in someone's shoes exactly what the problem is. So we had go on, sorry.
The other thing I think it taught us was that at a subsequent face-to-face meeting, rather than having a table of clinicians and a table of PPI members, actually we mixed it up better. And that actually enabled some of the researchers and clinicians to hear our voices more readily.
And I think, to be fair, some of them mixed themselves up. They became less frightened. The coffee at the beginning, I know we do a lot of these meetings on Teams, but it is really important to do face to face from time to time if you can. Because in a Teams call, you don't know that I don't have the dog sitting behind me, or I'm sitting here in my slippers, or whatever it is. I've got waterproof trousers. You just don't know. But the point I'm making is when you're all together, you can be seen as normal. You probably might not even be able to work out who are the patients from the clinicians. And that's really, really important because we're all potential patients. You know, there's no them and us. We're all potentially in the same boat or could be in the same boat. And that is what's so important. So I think both Tina and I would say that that meeting in person was so critical to how we all got on as a team. And that formed bonding. And so that when you have Teams meeting or someone's a bit short or they drop out of a meeting, they've just got work to do. They're still engaged in the process. And I think that was very clear when we tried to set up our first primary outcome with this particular trial that we did. And the primary outcome, if I remember rightly, was days alive and out of hospital. That's what the researchers want. And the PPI all said, no, that's not what we're interested in. We don't want to have days alive and out of hospital being the measure. We want our quality of life because we can come out of hospital and we can be fixed, but our quality of life is meagre. We can't do what we thought we could do. We can't do what we want to do. We can't do what we wanted to do before. And we were able, with a discussion, to disagree agreeably, but a collaboration to come out with what we wanted, which was quality of life, which I think was a real turning point with the clinicians in the group. Would you agree, Tina?
I do. I think it's only really because we developed that relationship with them over time that actually we were able to get them to understand that it was important to us and gave us the confidence to press for a more patient-centric approach than they were originally advocating. And as a result, they did put quality of life forward as the primary outcome that they were looking at in this piece of research.
So that was
sorry,
the big change, wasn't it? Sorry, that was the big change for us. It sort of turned the way we all worked together. And
yes.
From then on, the quality of the meetings just grew and grew and grew.
Yeah.
So that is really important. And that's really what I want to say about primary outcomes. You may think you've got one as a research team and you might be pushing down that road. But actually, when you try it with the recipients of the research, so the people you're actually going to put the research on at the end, if that's not what they want, then you've wasted time, effort, and money because it will not work. Tina.
So we actually, from a practical point of view, we've set up a system where we have a PPI only meeting once a month, and it's held about a week before the main project management meeting. And this allows us to invite the researchers who are working on certain parts of the project to join us so that we can find out what opinions would be valuable to them and to feedback our comments to the main meeting the next week. Initially, when we didn't have this system in place, we were struggling to get proper lines of communication between the whole PPI group and the researchers. As chair of the group, I was being asked my opinion, but that was my opinion. It wasn't the opinion of the whole group. So it's in order to not exclude anybody from the group, it was important to have PPI only meetings. And also, as a result of putting this system in place, we feel that it does mean that we have genuinely co-produced the prehabilitation program. It's been, and the other thing is that when we come to the main meeting, all of the PPI members can join, but they know the line that we're going to put forward. So it actually makes the main meetings much more valuable and useful for time as well.
And I think also it's your point of being top of the agenda rather than being as an afterthought at the end as everyone's saying got to go to the next meeting, which
yes,
is
we're quite strict on that. We've insisted that in the main meetings, the PPI report should always be at the top of the agenda because we were finding actually it was just falling off the end. And although it's not long, the PPI report, it does ensure that the patient's voice is foremost in the mind of the researchers. Because we really felt that without the patients, there's not much point doing medical research, as Sarah said earlier on.
And we've been very successful at this under the Clinical Research Collaborative of several spin-offs that we've suggested. So a decision support tool to help patients really understand the decisions they're making, because it's no good getting consent from someone if they don't understand what they've signed. And we do bandy around the phrase, oh, well, I've got informed consent. But do you as researchers really understand what you've got in your hands? And does the patient actually understand? And are they better informed? Or is it just a technical term? We do have a way in research to use terms and then forget what they actually mean because they are means to a process. And I think we've really questioned that as patients. You know, how do you know that you've informed the patient? How do you know they've heard what you want them to say? What you want to say to them? How do you know that they've understood what's going to happen to them? One of the biggest examples or biggest things that I notice is when I've had, and particularly a friend of mine recently who's had an operation, is she said, you don't know what you don't know. You have no idea what you're signing up for. And they say, oh, you'll be home within 6 days. What they don't tell you is the next 90 days, the next 180 days, the next, 3 years or whatever. It's a means to an end. And I think that's so important, is trying to share with people, and also you understand as a clinician what you're trying to achieve by getting informed consent. So one of the things we're doing in research is spin-offs. These wonderful ideas that are really, really practical and useful can come from PPI. And Tina's looking at me now because I've gone slightly off piece, but that's what I love doing. So that's me. So we're very fortunate as a PPI group that we've got a good mix of members who were involved in the early days and who understand the project inside out. And we've got some great new members. All of them have something in common. They've all had a surgery, or they've had an intervention of some description, which makes them really useful to the meeting, or they're a carer. And they were able to bring fresh thoughts and new opinions to the mix. And as we change the group over or grow the group, we get a really good mix. And we're very welcoming. We're a nice bunch. We are friendly. We try very hard to be friendly. And we feel that we've avoided becoming stale or just part of the establishment. So new faces come in and question why we're doing things and what we're doing for things for. And all the members seem to sing from the same hymn sheet. They all have the same values of trying to do good, because we know we're not necessarily going to fix the problems of the members in the group, but we are very much hoping that we can solve or help people down the line. That's what PPI is so valuable for. The people you have in the meeting are actually helping the next set of people down the line.
It's been quite fortunate that we have had people who have been involved right from the beginning, because it's actually given us great stability. But on the other hand, we have been able to stir in some new blood, and hopefully made those new people very welcome, and they've been very much become part of the team. We have had some challenges along the way. Yes, it's gone very well in the main with the group members, but we did have one group member who really wasn't contributing to meetings with due respect to others. Some of their comments were quite offensive to several of the group, and they were dominating the conversation in meetings. Now, the PPI group gained support from the research team, and the issue was taken direct to the PPI member involved. And ultimately, it was agreed that it was time for them to move on from this particular project, as they were heavily committed to PPI roles elsewhere. Now, obviously, it can be difficult to people management is not what we went into PPI for, but inevitably these things will hit you and have to deal with it. And hopefully we rose to that challenge reasonably well. But we do have some areas we still feel we do need to improve. We've got a diverse group in terms that we've got more women involved, we've got more patient carers involved, but actually we do still feel that we would like to widen the cultural mix. Now, we have been working quite hard to put strategies in place to help us achieve this aim over time, and Sarah will talk a little bit more about that. But we've not quite got that right, and we would be interested to hear if anybody has ideas, because as a PPI group, we're very much still learning, we're very much growing, and we will be interested to know if there are any techniques other people have used to widen their PPI groups.
So the Clinical Research Collaborative Cardiac Surgery has been running, I'm sure I'll get corrected by somebody in the audience, but 2017, we did a priority setting partnership with the James Lind Alliance, if you're familiar with what that process involves. But anyway, it came out of that, and we set up 10 research priorities. And we have then, since then, been working under different priorities, putting in research applications for the top 10 questions that people want answered about cardiac surgery. And I think the thing with PPI is some coalesced or immediately, they gravitated towards us. Others have been more diffident and harder to reach, but we've come up with some wonderful ideas. And one of my colleagues at Leicester, Dr. Anne Cheng, has come up with the dancing in groups in ethnic communities and working, and then they have a dance and then a chat and cake, and then she goes into other things. But the point is, it all takes time. There are people who are hard to reach because they don't want to be reached sometimes. So you have to make the effort to go to them. And that takes time, it takes effort, and it takes certain types of people to be able to mix in with the groups, get their confidence, and then get them to feedback. So we're always challenged by trying to make sure we reach as many people as possible. The neurodivergent, the deaf, the blind as well. As somebody put in the chat, mental health issues. That's one of my biggest concerns, is how do we talk with, how do we contact people or get them engaged? So the challenge is always there, and we're never slow in admitting that, but we have to start somewhere. So I don't believe we beat up a group just because we haven't got that far. What we do is we embrace where we've got and we say, how do we go again? And one of the
We have
things that,
used the
yeah,
EDI checklist that has been put together for researchers to use. So we have looked at some of the techniques involved on that checklist, which I believe was rolled out back in 2025.
that was
But yes,
Royal College of Surgeons. We relaunched
yeah,
it. Yeah. And
we still
that's for
feel we have
research.
more to gain.
Yeah, so it's a stepping stone. The EDI checklist was launched, and so researchers have to work, from that tool to give them hints and guidance as to who they need to include and who they need to reach out to. And so we hope that that will play a major role to give. It's unlike anything else that's ever been developed before, and so we want research to be truly inclusive, as much as we possibly can. But there are barriers, and there will continue to be barriers and challenges. But then, life's got barriers and challenges all around it. So we will just keep doing what we are doing. We're also working at a communications matrix, which hopefully will help how we talk to people. I mean, I used to be a governor of a college, and one of the things we spent a lot of time doing was actually reviewing how we teach young people, give them information. And I was staggered at the different ways. I think there are at least 7 different ways. You hear it through your ears, you see it, you have to do it in order to understand it. All sorts of ways. I mean, I'm a novice at this, but I was never ceased to be impressed by how differently we all take in information. And so giving someone a checklist might be an anathema to them. Showing them a video might be no good at all. We don't know. And so we really, really want to understand how people take on information, because that would be key. So there's lots of work in PPI, and we want to gather people from all different backgrounds to try and help us get the best. Because actually, when people are in hospital, they're stressed, they're sick, they're lonely. And no matter how many family members are around them, it's just them going through it. So we have to make that connection as best we can to give them the information to either get them to engage in research or even to go through the procedure that they're facing. I've gone off piste again, but I'm having a lovely time.
Yeah. She has, yeah. Our prehab group, we do try and take every opportunity we can to work as a team, having got the team that we've got. So I don't know, Sarah, if you want to talk some more
Yes.
about the few things that we try and do.
Yes, we did a British Heart Foundation. It was a festival in Bristol, and
Bristol
it's a
Heart
Bristol
Festival.
Heart Festival. I beg your pardon, Bristol Heart Festival. And Tina and I went along, and I went along with my son, who I no longer care for. He can look after himself. But we shared, sat on a podium and shared information with the audience. And we had a few people come up afterwards to say, yes, that's me. That's exactly me, or that's my son, daughter, or whatever. We'd like to get involved. So there's a start with that. And we have got our T-shirts on, but I'm not going to flash. Yeah, well done, Tina.
Oh, mine went out focus.
There we go. I'll
We
twizzle
had
around,
some
but I can't.
T-shirts put together really with the idea that if one of our members did a sports event, and so if anybody does anything like that, we encourage them to wear their T-shirts so that we can create opportunities to discuss PPI more widely, because it's perfectly possible that you might meet somebody in that situation, and perhaps they've had open heart surgery, or they're caring for somebody and actually would like to get involved. So that's what we've tried to do with those.
And some of our PPI have gained more confidence over time and have become co-applicants for programme development grants, such as the paediatric congenital study. And that way we felt we've been able to disseminate our effect wider and further and really get people involved. And they feel really invested in part of the research, and they are delighted to share what information and their experience they have in order to help people get research grants over the line. So in summary, we're a very successful PPI group. We have called in PPI far and wide and when we started, but we never stopped trying to improve and move forward. And we do listen. It's not just a one-way system of us spouting, well, you can't do it like that, you've got to do it like that. It's a collaborative between research, the research team, and the PPI, and we try and share the information that we've gained that we don't choose to have. We don't choose to have this experience or information. So we share what we have in order to try and make their grants more successful. And I'm never more delighted when you see that someone's become a professor or someone's been elevated because of the work that they've done using the PPI along the way as well. And so our successes, we've kept a core group all the way through the program development grant to research grant. And that's really helpful. If you're researchers on this call, you need an anchor group. It doesn't have to be very big, but you need to understand that they are the people who can help mentor the new ones. They can bring them up to speed because it is time and investment, and you haven't always got the time to invest in PPI. Always keep the door open, always be available for a cup of tea, of course, but PPI leads like Tina can always talk to other PPI members, keep them on board, understand why, what problems they have. The other thing I would always say is always remember that often these people are sick. They give of their time because they want to make things better. So don't waste their time. Please don't waste their time. Be focused when you plan a meeting, understand what you want from them, let them go away and think about it if that's the way they work. Work to their abilities, not to your time frame, if I can. Ideally, you work to both. But we're also so we're working with PPI all the time. It's a huge investment of time and effort, and that's often done by PPI. We welcome new members to the group. We hold dedicated PPI meetings, of which Tina chairs, and we're able to control our own narrative, which I think is really important when it then goes into the bigger meetings. And we're widening the scope of the group by the Bristol Hearts Festival, and of course today's webinar, of which I see there are 197 people listening, recording this webinar. So I hope you
I wish you
useful.
hadn't pointed that out, Sarah. I'm self-conscious now.
No pressure, Tina. Pressure at all.
We feel that genuinely we are not just a tick box exercise, that we are real PPI. When it's time to write the interim reports for the NIHR, the PPI group do the PPI report. It's not just done by the researchers on our behalf, but we do it ourselves, and it's the real deal, we feel. We have obviously, in summary, had some challenges that we've mentioned. Managing members of the group can be hard if difficulties arise. It can be hard to keep the research focused on patients, where if clinicians have fixed ideas, and so the group needs to be as one and determined for that. And it's also been hard for us to build a fully inclusive group. Our aim today, and we hope you've enjoyed our chit chat, is that really we are hoping to give you some enthusiasm to become more involved in the PPI aspect of medical research. Either as a patient, if you're wondering whether to get involved, yes, do. It's very rewarding. If you're a carer, if you've had to take somebody through a medical intervention, if you're an interested member of the public, or very much so if you're a researcher, please take us on board. We will add to your research and rather than get in the way. For sure, the approach of using PPI, this approach to medical research, does come with its challenges, but it is very, very rewarding.
And I would say as
Sarah,
much as
have you got
anything,
anything to add?
yeah, I would say as much as anything, and it isn't always comfortable, but we are speaking truth to power. I mean, that's what we do. We are very good at it, and we're very passionate about trying to get the best from the research teams we're working with. We're there to help. We're not there to hinder. And I heard a lovely quote this morning, which I'm going to use. It's going to be my quote from now on. It's called "A rising tide lifts all boats." And the rising tide is PPI. and the quality of research that the researchers are now producing with us on board. And we're lifting everybody up because of the input that PPI has made and given. And I'd really like to thank the NIHR, because without their commitment to funding PPI, and to thinking that we have worth, we would have our voice would be diminished. It would be a lot harder. So I do thank them for that. I think we're absolutely essential, and I think you ignore us at your peril. That's my closing shot.
So thank you very much for everybody listening. Hopefully you've been putting some questions in the Q&A. And so our aim is actually for us to hand over to Kate Gilbert, and she's going to deal with the question side of things.
Perfect. Tina, Sarah, thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastic. So we've got quite a few questions here, so we can see if we can get through them. For those attending, there should be a Q&A function on your Zoom, so you can just click there and put your question in. But also you can upvote. So if people have already asked a question you want to ask, you can select the thumbs up, and that would put it a bit higher on our list here. So starting off then, Sasha has asked, what is your recruitment method for new patient members? So I know, Tina, you kind of asked it as a question of the group to put their ideas in, but how did you approach that?
Right, I'll go first, and I'm sure Sarah can add also. We used the research nurses from Bristol Hospital quite heavily. So when they had patients coming through who they were speaking to prior to surgery or after surgery, to see if they were interested in taking part in any research, they would help us to find individuals. And again, we've really asked them if they can look for a wider cultural mix. And they've had a couple of times where they've invited people who they thought might be appropriate, but actually, for one reason or another, some of them might have got cold feet. So that was one of our ways we hope to widen the diversity. There was another piece of research done where there were some people involved in a trial, and actually we pulled a couple of those into our trial into our PPI group, having been in a trial. And so they were enthusiastic participants. They've been great. Sometimes it's people that we know, we can say, we know somebody who might be interested. Sarah, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I mean, we've done it in a varying mixture of ways, and often now it's by word of mouth contacting communities and asking them if they are interested. But we started with a cohort from the Leicester Hospital, from the patient group.
It was Bristol. We were all Bristol.
Sorry, yes, no, I'm talking from the CRC one. From our point of view, we started the cardiac one with Leicester Hospital, then and Bristol started with Bristol Hospital. So we've built, and then now there's the British Heart Foundation patient group, I believe they've set up, and the joy of this job is the more you meet people, the more you set up different networks, and you can key into various different networks. But the key thing, the takeaway I would say, is it takes time. It really, really takes time. We have a very, very good administrator who helps us. So IT is superb. And we have a very good one in Leicester. And they help us with the contacts and doing the contacts. And we all know contacts who know contacts who know contacts. And we try and get people who've had recent operations as well, because you need to keep that refreshed, because experiences change. So there is no one way. I think Tina and I would both agree there is no one way to do this. You work on who you know, and then you send the messages out. A blanket call will often come back with nothing. So you might, but if you go quietly through something like the Leicester Centre for Ethnic Research, you may get one or two who'll come in and say, yes, I'm interested. So it grows very slowly, but then it starts to get ahead of steam.
We're quite pleased that, in fact, over time we have, because initially on the prehab study, we were all from Bristol, having had surgery in Bristol. But actually, that's very much spread out. We have people who've had surgery all over the country now. And that is helpful because obviously all hospitals and all experiences are different.
Very true.
Brilliant. Thank you both. So the next question, you kind of mentioned, Sarah, specifically about the success of the PPI group. So someone's asked, how do you know that your public involvement was successful? So was it that you evaluated the process? Did you measure the impact? So how did you know?
You have to fill in forms. This particular one we know because the feedback from NIHR was exemplary. I think I've got something here. The arrangements for patient and public involvement and engagement were outstanding. NIHR committee panel. That was from one of the trials we've done. You get feedback when you submit for an application, you will know you get comments back from the NIHR committee, and they will either say this is excellent, or this will say go back, do more work, and come back to us. So there's a PPI section, so we know when we've done well, when we get an accolade, and we think job well done. By the same token, let me be absolutely honest. One Monday morning, I had a glowing accolade. The other one, I was slated. And so, not from the NIHR, I hasten to add, but from another organisation. So it really depends. So we know if we think we've done a good job. The other thing also is if we as a group think we've done a good job, it's how we feel about it. It's not necessarily what people have to say about us. We want to work as a team and we want to deliver for the research part of our team, but it's how we feel of a team. If we've done a good job, we will push back on some comments if we think, no, that's not right, you haven't viewed us properly. So, yeah.
The reality is it's probably quite subjective because we're taking comments people have made. It's maybe objective in terms that we know specifically where we've changed people's minds on things, but have we actually done a specific study and recorded things? No, we haven't. And so that's why we feel that we have done a good job because we've been praised for doing so, but we also know that there are gaps.
And we also now complete logs as well. That's one of the things I do with other things. We complete patient involvement logs, so we can prove what we've done along the road, on the way.
Fabulous, thank you. A very quick question, but there are a few people asking around the EDI checklist you mentioned. If you could just direct them to that and where that is.
Yes, I
Sarah, do you want to do that?
Yes, I will. I may have to send it to you to send it to them.
Yes, good idea.
Unless anybody who is on the call knows exactly where to find it and can put it in the chat. But yes, sorry, I'm not techie while focusing on this at the same time, but I'll certainly send it to you.
Brilliant.
Basically, that was developed through Leicester University and some other groups of researchers, and it was presented at the Royal College of Surgeons in April 2025. And it's basically a way to try and ensure that the research that is done is relevant for all groups. Oh, somebody's put it in the chat. Thank you.
Oh, well done. Well done. Thank you, Michelle. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't have identified you, but thank you. I may have just been fired by Leicester University now.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you, Michelle. So the next question is around the need, or do you need to involve other stakeholders? So considering who and what organisations should have a voice in research, so healthcare professionals, policymakers, social care systems, other decision makers, is there any power imbalance that may exist if you bring people to the same table?
Well, my feeling is it's called public and patient involvement. Well, our PPI group are patients and carers, but then we have other groups of the researchers coming in to ask us questions and so on. But presumably any of those people could become part of a PPI group because it's public as well. So if they feel that they have relevant questions to ask or relevant things to put forward, I'm quite sure they'd be very welcome. What do you think, Sarah?
Yes, I would agree. And often PPI, the thing I was saying to clinicians is patients aren't just patients. They've got a huge backstory. So they may be a stakeholder as well. You shouldn't just label someone as a patient and they just become a blue blob in an NHS gown. They have huge experience and wealth of experience. And they can be stakeholders. So yes, we should include everybody, bring everyone to the table. And by that, I mean, it should still be workable, but everybody's welcome in my book. The sooner we
tend to keep We tend to keep our PPI group to around about 10 people, because that way we can, the meetings are very manageable, but you've actually got a wide spread of experiences. And so where we've lost somebody, we've tried to replace them, and keep the mix good. But we would aim for about 10. We feel it's manageable for us anyway. Different people may have different ideas.
Great. Okay, so on to the next question. Can PPI contributors help you address the study's ethical issues? So can their input help how research manages potential risk and burden of the research area?
I would say very definitely. But we've had cases where they've said, oh, we're looking into this particular thing. And all of the patients have gone, we wouldn't have done that. No good to us. You know, I'm sure it's very interesting, but no way. We couldn't have managed it, or we didn't have time, or we didn't feel it was safe, or we felt it was intrusive, or whatever. So I would say very much that we do ask the tricky questions, or we sometimes, if you're studying something, you're so focused on that, you don't maybe always look at the wider picture. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I can think of one case in point when a research team put up a proposition and everyone went, no way, there is no way you could ask anyone to go onto a research trial with that sort of risk. They just won't do it. And they looked a little bit perplexed. It was quite interesting. It was as though we'd spoken a foreign language. And they looked, to everyone across the screen and they went, oh, okay, we'll go back, we'll have another think, and came back with a really, really good design. But it's fascinating how until you air the proposition, you may go along thinking it's great, but until you actually put it to the patient or potential people who may be undergoing that research, you then realize it's not a runner.
Sometimes the patients just say that's just too big an ask. We just won't.
Brilliant, thank you. The next question is around your mention of monthly PPI meetings and the main meetings as well. So there's a comment here around that being a big commitment. So do the PPI members go to all meetings, and then how do you support people to attend?
That's up to the PPI members. We would say that the priority is the PPI meeting. So what we do on the PPI meeting, we're asked particular questions or our thoughts on certain parts of the research. We put that together, and then we put a PPI report together. And now, so there's no need for anybody other than myself as the chair of the meeting to go to the main project management meeting, because I know that the report I'm presenting represents all voices from the PPI group. However, other members of the PPI group are very welcome. And actually, a large number of the PPI group do attend the main project management meetings. There doesn't tend to be many questions asked from the PPI members at those main meetings because it's not necessary. We've had our conversation before, and obviously you don't want your main meeting too cluttered up with PPI traffic, as it were, because we've done that separately. But if they are able to attend those meetings, it does give people a very good overview of what the researchers are thinking and their direction of travel. So it can be helpful to attend the main meeting, but it's not compulsory. So if people felt that they just had a small bit of time, then it would be perfectly valid to just attend the PPI meeting. And obviously we have members who are working, and so they just send their apologies. We always send the minutes out as well, so they still feel involved.
Brilliant,
thanks. I agree with that. Yeah. Yes, we're there to help, not to hinder. So we just, Tina's got a very good system going, and anybody who then attends the meeting is just an observer, having given their voice at the previous meeting.
Fabulous. So there's now a question around whether you had a ways of working document in place for the group.
We actually don't, and I'm sure we probably should. So yes, actually, what I would venture to say is that our development of the PPI group has been quite organic. And I have seen on other PPI groups that they have had that. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. We've got there, but actually we've never written it down. And I think if I were to do something like this again, you could start by writing our system down as a ways of working document, so that maybe you didn't have the bumps and scrapes that we had to develop what we've got. So no, we didn't. I'm quite sure you should. And I think that if you were starting a new PPI group, that would be very valuable.
That's where we disagree agreeably. I've been asked to write one of these reports because research colleagues say, how do you do it? I'm very intuitive in the sense of I grow organically. I work at, and I love the bumps and the scrapes because that's what makes us real. So I think the issue I would have, the thing I would say to challenge Tina, yes, I think a how-to guide is really helpful, but it shouldn't be prescriptive. You see, every PPI group is completely different and they come at it from completely different ways. And you have to spend time getting to know your group. If there's one takeaway, it's an investment. A PPI group is an investment. And sometimes as researchers, you might rip your hair out and think, well, that was a waste of a meeting because we've gone completely down that way when we should have gone down that way. But what you learn from it is gold dust, because you learn how people work, what frightens them, their personal backstories sometimes as to what motivates them to be on that meeting with you sharing their story, because it's personal. You know, all of these comments that people make are personal. They may not look like it, but they come from a wealth of information. And so that's quite hard to capture in a document. So I would definitely do, here are your top 10. And then I think the rest of it is down to you. Grow it as you want to, because you'll get the best out of everyone. If you're trying to follow a rigid route, which I know is not what Tina is prescribing,
No.
but there has to be some mystery to it. And I know that's not what researchers like, because they like certainty.
I think I would consider part of my chair of PPI role to be to take some of the bumps and scrapes from the PPI away from the researchers, so that we deal with that as a group, and then we're able to provide a sort of common thought. Whereas actually, if the researchers are trying to do that part ourselves, then you could find your PPI group getting in the way of the research, and that's really not what we want. We want PPI to be an adjunct to the research. So, that is something we do try and sort all those things out ourselves.
Brilliant. So next question is, should there be a time limit for PPI members to stay involved in a research project? There's a potential to get locked in to the condition if not. So thoughts on that?
I think that's very interesting. And there have been times where, certainly with this one member, we perhaps thought that was part of the problem. You know, you can almost become researchers yourself, so you can't see the big picture anymore. We've put a couple of things into place to try and minimize that. One is that although we've got the original base of people, we're often adding new people in, so it keeps it fresh and it keeps people coming and asking the obvious questions that you've forgotten to think about if you've been in the research for a long time. But also, one of the aspects, one of the sort of work packages of the research is to ask other patients what they think. So we're putting together a prehabilitation program. And so actually, we're not asking the PPI members, right, do this prehabilitation program, what do you think? They're taken out to genuine patients who are undergoing it at the time. So we actually have non-regular PPI views, if you see what I mean, because yes, we are very cognizant that that could be a danger, and it's a real balance between it being very useful for people who have that knowledge and have been with the project all the way through. It makes things a lot quicker and easier, and yet actually you also want fresh eyes who are willing to point out the errors to you. Sarah?
I would agree. I would agree. There is real value in having seasoned PPI members real value, but you need to mix it up. But we always go further afield. It's never just one group. So I think locked in, yes, every once in a while, but the majority, no, they're very valuable and very helpful.
Brilliant, thank you. The next question. So this started off with a thank you to both of you. As a research methodologist applying for NIHR funding, I'm keen to integrate PPI not just as a tick spot, but as a core component of the trial integrity. Are there opportunities for researchers with skills in project management and people development to join PPI groups as methodological partners? I'm particularly interested in how we can better evaluate the impact of PPI on trial outcomes and recruitment. So is this a role in your current group? Like, could that kind of be supported?
It very much could be supported. We had one session where a chap came from Plymouth, I think, who had set up a computer program to evaluate how good our PPI had been and how valuable we thought it was. And we all input our stuff into the program together, and that showed how valuable the PPI was. So that was a very useful thing that we did. And absolutely, we would certainly welcome somebody like that onto our group, because you've got somebody who, in fact, the researchers we've got, the methodologists, are very good in that they are very much keen on putting PPI front and centre, and the way they write up their applications shows that. But if you had a group of researchers who maybe that was new to, it would be incredibly useful to have a methodologist on the group who could say, no, this is important. This is the way you write your forms into the NIHR. So yes, I would have thought that would be very valuable. Sarah?
Yeah, I would agree.
Fab, thank you both. Aware we've only got 9 minutes left, so we'll try to get through some of these questions, but thank you everyone for putting them in. The next one is around whether you had any young people in your PPI group, specifically that were under 18, and if yes, were there kind of any extra things or measures you had to put in place for them to be part of it?
Really difficult to get youngsters. For our particular group, not so relevant. There's also a congenital heart surgery group, which will be aimed more at young people, because that young people tend to fall into the congenital heart surgery group, whereas this particular prehab group isn't. I've had a number of open heart surgeries myself, but also so has my son, so has Sarah's son. And we did manage to get them to engage with us for the Bristol Heart Festival. But the reality is they're both working, they're both busy. And so neither of them are able to engage on a regular basis. And that is a problem because, if you've got somebody who perhaps works for a company who is able to give them time out to do PPR, great. But there is a definite lean towards retirees on our PPI group for purely practical reasons, as it happens. So yeah, that's a tricky one that we haven't quite cracked. But also it's meant that we've never had to address whether we would have to do anything different for an under 18-year-old.
Yeah. And I think from my point of view, I've worked with the congenital group, and a lot of them don't want to engage. They want to have their treatment and they want to be gone. They do not want to spend their life, in a sense, giving back at this stage in their life. They may do later on, but the sooner they can get out of that particular label, the better. They want to be out with their mates.
That was very true with my son, and also myself as a young person, as a teenager. I didn't want to be that congenital heart person. I buried my head in the sand for years. It was only when I went round again I thought. So yes, it is hard to get them to engage. I think their carers are really engaged, but the actual children themselves.
I mean, that's
don't
how I
want
got
to.
into it. This isn't my background and it isn't Tina's background, but that we both got in as carers and Tina as a patient. But I think there was something else I was going to say about it. That's the other thing. I think the other thing also is on some of these trials, you hear and read information you really don't want to see. And it's very important to understand the trial, life expectancy, and things like that. So on some occasions, it can be very, very unpleasant. And I think, it doesn't always come with a warning, you just see it. And from my personal experience, there are days when I just switch the camera off and think, oh, that was really heavy. I don't want to do that. And I go and walk around the garden and I go and stroke the dog. And then I come back in again. So it does have an impact. I'd be lying to you if I said, oh, it's all fine and we all do good all day long. No, it has a real impact sometimes what we do, and it can be distressing. And I think that all research teams should remember that because it is key to getting the best, but also being kind to the people you work with, which I think is important.
Thank you both. So the next question is around challenges. So have you faced any challenges in arranging payment for participants? And if so, how did you overcome these?
We have a little. Yes, Sarah doesn't do it. There is a specific amount that people are paid for their time and their expenses. And as chair of this particular PPI group, I just keep a very careful note of meetings that people have attended. And then every few months we put through a payment through our admin person who's wonderful. And I just notify people of what they've been paid. So we try and keep it very above board and very specific what people are paid for. And so I make those arrangements.
And
Tina,
this is very good. Sorry, this one, this particular research team is very good at paying. It's very difficult sometimes because there's no funding before a research grant is given. So, but you have to have the PPI on board in order to get the research proposal over the line. And I have always been a very strong advocate of paying for PPI from the get-go. I think if you pay nothing, you don't value what you get for free. And I also feel that a lot of these people sometimes don't work. They are low socioeconomic class. And how on earth do you get a cross-section of people being able to afford to do this? And also, this is experience that has value. And nobody else would hand over experience like this in a marketing world because it has a value. And you could probably go to drug companies and sell it by the bucket load if you wanted to. So I think there's a really important to recognise the value of PPI because it's going to save you an awful lot of money long term. It's going to save a lot of time and it's going to save a lot of effort. So it is important to recognise people. Nobody expects they're going to get rich doing this, but I do think they have to be paid a proper amount. And I do applaud the fact that the NHR have lifted up the amount as of December last year. And I do worry about the future of PPI and its funding going forward, because I think that would be a real loss if we are no longer funded and we're expected to be a volunteer group, of which, I think you would lose a lot of the quality.
But you do have to have somebody who is keeping a very careful list. True. And making sure that they
Tina.
know. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant.
So well, it was a bit messy at first, wasn't it? It was messy at first, and yeah. So I felt it was easy just to keep a specific list. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you both. So just going to ask a last question now, but thank you everyone who's put questions in the chat that we haven't been able to answer. So as a researcher from a developing country, we've had to develop our PPI groups as these are fairly new in our country, particularly at community setting. What tips could you share to ensure the sustainability of these groups?
Okay, can I go in? Okay, so I think you find a good leader. You find a really good leader, and I would say that, wouldn't I? But the point is, Tina is a very, very good chair of our group. And I think I'm a reasonably good chair of my group. You've got to have someone who's approachable. You've got to have someone who puts in the effort and the time. And you keep the communities by picking a leader in each of those communities who can feed back and who is invested in the process. And I think that's really important. People are passionate about this because they want to make a difference, and you just got to tap into it and give them the help they need to be able to reach further and wider in their community. But it takes time, it takes effort, and energy. But it rewards by the bucket load. It really, really does, and it pays dividends for research. Tina, whether
Yes, I think that's true, really. It's the investing early, and investing time and effort rather than money. If you invest in that group, they will do you well. But if not, people will get fed up and wander off. So they have to feel listened to. Yeah, definitely.
tea and cake was a good start. I'll go anywhere for cake.
Difficult on Teams.
Bring your own cake and bring your own tea. Yeah. I know it's very cheap, isn't it? Very cheap.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for being in the hot seat, and thank you to everyone for their questions. I'll now hand back to Dawn.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you, Tina and Sarah, for sharing such valuable insights. That was really, really helpful. We've had lots of positive feedback in the chat during your presentation, so thank you. I just wanted to signpost everybody to our next couple of events that we've got diarised now. We've got the 12th of March at 11 a.m. and the 22nd of May at 10 a.m. And you'll receive an email shortly with the recording of this webinar. So I know that some people were having some technical issues with their audio. So hopefully you can watch the actual recording when you receive that. It also goes up onto our NIHR TV on YouTube as well. There'll also be an evaluation form, and we'll be very grateful if you would complete that because it helps us to inform future webinars. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank